Thanks very much for signing in today. We're excited to have so much interest, and this is the first of what we hope will be quite a few Zoom meetings. And so let's see, I want to thank Matt Mullinex and John Nelson for helping with the waiting room and security. So we're here tonight to talk about how weight affects behavior in falconry. And controlling the weight is one of the major tools in a falconer's toolbox, but the weight has to have meaning. I mean, anyone can keep a hawk at the same weight from day to day. Well, some of us can anyway. But are you holding the hawk at the right hunting weight? Is it an optimal hunting weight? So we're going to discuss how to identify the optimal hunting weight, and also how it can change over various conditions. So, Tom, do you want to add something to that about optimal hunting weight?
Yeah, it's basically, if I would tell anybody, try to see good falconry. If you've seen good falconry, it just speaks for itself. The weights, it's going to be, the birds are going to follow properly. They're going to be in proper position. Position is everything, whether it's a long wing or, Harris hawk, it doesn't matter. It's got to be in the right position when you flush something. And all that is to do with weight, usually. If the hawk's too high in the tree, it can't get down fast enough. If it's too low, it can't see the game. It's got to be, the weight means a lot of stuff at this time. But again, most people don't recognize that. They don't recognize, they just come home and excuse, oh, well, the bird didn't see the rabbit, we only jumped two, so on and so forth. And it's just, it's a fine line between getting it right and getting it wrong, but flush a lot of game is what I always say. Game solves all your problems. I mean, scout, find game, and then work on your weight, and it'll make sense in time. But, general go on with a bunch of particulars, understanding weight. Weight has a lot of different meanings to a hawk. It's it's pretty complicated, especially anybody flying small birds. Everything's exaggerated. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, no, that's good. So in this talk, we're going to cover how weight affects hunger and how important hunger is to our training. And then we're going to look at how we manage weight control, just some basics. And then we're going to delve into what optimum hunting weight is and how do we find it? How do we identify it? So first, we're going to make a shameless plug here that we're proud of the Harris Hawk Revolution, and we wrote it for ourselves and for other falconers. We want people to understand their birds and do a better job, and we want to hear feedback even on our book and how we can improve it. But we'd really recommend reading chapter 6 if you have it, to look into more information about weight control and fitness and finding your hawk's optimum hunting weight. So science shows something that we as falconers all know about hunger. There was an interesting study that was done on wild common buzzards, and the researchers were trapping the hawks on BCs that were baited with mice. And they measured the time it took for the hawk to attack the trap, and then they measured the hawk's fitness. And for their body condition index, they used the body mass, the weight, with the wing length. And what they found was that the body condition was negatively related to attack time. So what that means is the lower the hawk's condition, the shorter the time it took for the hawk to attack, which seems like a no-brainer for us, right? So from an evolutionary perspective, the hungrier the predator is, it may have to take more risks to ensure that it eats. So hunger makes a raptor more daring or bolder. And in falconry, we know that it makes a hungry hawk, it's going to be more attentive, it's going to be more responsive to food rewards, it's going to attack more quickly, and it's more likely to attack larger prey and novel prey, new things that it's never encountered before. So I also want to mention this thing about, we've been thinking about this a lot for this talk and throughout life, and it makes the hawk less fearful, and that really is a friend to falconry. So we're going to mention that a little bit more too. Hunger and training goes back a long way in falconry. Emperor Frederick II of Hohenstaufen writes in his in the 1240s that falcon weight must be reduced enough that the falcon will readily feed on a tiring before you take it outside for a walk. So this is in the early manning stages, right? And what that's showing is that hunger increases the bird's focus on obtaining food rather than being wary. So again, hunger is making the bird and somehow less fearful. I mean, it's really starting the hunger itself is starting the training. It should never be just hunger in the training, but it is an important element. And Scarlett O'Hara's famous scene in Gone with the Wind is famous for a reason. Let's hear what Scarlett has to say.
As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
So this really speaks to a survival instinct that's deep within us. Prior experience with hunger has profound effects on the psyche. And I don't think Scarlett ever starved to death in this, but you know, just having hunger, it leaves a lasting impression. So in our own Harris Ox, we think that hunger actually changes the set point for feeling full and increases their appetite. Something's going on there. Because what we've seen is in our young Harris Ox, a lot of times they reach the age of 15 to 20 weeks, which is when we think they should start some kind of training. But yet it's pretty far. Maybe hunting season is 2 months away because it just happens to be when they hatched, right? So they're 15 to 20 weeks old, and we want to do some initial manning. During that period, we usually get them to the point where they're just hungry enough to maybe hop to the fist for food or maybe fly a short distance. And then we fatten them up and stick them back in the cage with their parents. Well, when we take them back out, their weight's a lot higher. I mean, how much you think they've usually?
At least 50 grams higher, and it's a whole different bird. It's just acting different. It doesn't want to be hungry again. It remembered being hungry, and you got more weight to deal with. It gained that weight just because I think it was hungry. And you're dealing with a different animal, not an inferior, not a superior animal, but it's a different animal than the first time you got out. It never had experienced hunger. That bird had never missed a meal in its life, being captive bred, and I'm real diligent about always providing food. So
Tom knows how to feed things,
yeah,
y'all.
that's about all I'm good at is feeding things. So it had never missed a meal, but once they miss a meal or two, even when they fatten up, it's in their psyche, it's in their memory, and it changes everything. For the better usually. I don't think it's not a bad thing, but it's noticeable, very noticeable.
Yes,
Yeah.
it seems like the second time around, we're getting them out right before hunting season, that we're not having to drop them as low as when, we were doing their initial training. Of course, they could have built up some muscle in the flight cage too, but it doesn't seem too likely. It seems like they are acting different. So that initial hunger may have made a difference. Seems to make them feel hungrier and be more responsive at a higher weight. Okay, so just that was a little theory about hunger theory, whatever. And now we're going to talk about weight control and our approach. And we follow our hero, Harry McElroy, in his basic approach to weight control. He has the 22-hour weight control that we pretty much follow to the letter. And in his classic book, Desert Hawking 2, which he published in 1977, dyslex, he writes, in 1975, we began to keep records on weight loss from after hunting until the following afternoon. And so basically what that means is you need to know how much your hawk burns in a day to hold its weight and calculate what it needs hourly. And then when you know that, you can calculate how many hours it's going to be to your next hunting time. And in Harry's case, he hunted about the same time of day every day for about 2 hours. And that's why it's the 22-hour weight control instead of 24, which he thought was very funny. He and Beth went off, just back and forth, like, what are we going to name this? But it's a great principle to live by.
And yeah, it's a fine principle. It works fine, except it doesn't allow, most people want to crop up their bird after a kill or do that. Well, rewarded heavily and this and that. Well, how do you do this? How do you know? So we never crop a bird up ever. We don't crop up a merle and a sharpshin, a Cooper's hawk, Harris hawk, red tail. I've never cropped any of them up in my life. And so
not even on the first kill.
Not even on the first kill. And it doesn't bother them one bit because I want them ready to hunt every day, every day. If you come to the house, we got 8 birds out there, 8 birds are ready to hunt every day. There's no excuse. There's no roller coaster. The roller coaster is very bad. I think up and down, you raise their weight, you lower it. No, the birds are always within 10, 15 grams of, over a whole season. And it makes it easy to manage. I mean, I can't manage a bird if I feed it up completely one day and then I fast it, and I just can't do all that. So it really works, and it doesn't affect the birds how hard they want to hunt either. I found it makes no difference at all. And again, every year we send out X amount of birds. 1 or 2 of them will be killed by cropping them up. By the birds at its lowest weight, they'll crop it up in the end of hot day in the fall. The bird will get sour crop and die. And that's another reason why I never crop a bird up. You see, it's of no use, other than it makes the falconer feel good. That's one of the main reasons I find.
Well, I think the bird likes it.
The bird likes it too, but I think the falconer really sleeps a lot, fed it up, and caught its first head. And again, you're not going, hey, make hay when the sun's out. It's like you just caught a rabbit, a bird, whatever. Hey, go right the next day. Keep it going. Get in the groove. Falconer is all about staying in that groove to me, and that's what a 22-hour weight control, day after day after day really works. So sorry about going off like that. But
No, that's good. So we weigh our hawks 1 to 2 times a day, and we log their weight, and we also the weight has to have meaning, so we're logging notable behaviors, and that could be things like if it's a young bird and maybe it didn't catch a rabbit that day, we might still note like, hey, it chased hard, it pulled fur. Or if it's an older hawk and it's hot and the dang thing went off and took a bath, bathing needs weight to be lower when it's hot. That might be another note, something like that. But, basic, and we record the kills. So we're noting what the weights mean, and then generally it takes about 40 to 55 grams a day to hold a female Harris hawk's weight in our climate, which is generally warm. And the hunting weight, as Tom was saying, we're usually holding it between 10 to 20 grams, plus or minus 10 grams, plus or minus 10 grams is what I meant. Yeah. And
so basically our way of doing it is, you don't have to do it this way, but it works fine for us dealing with a lot of birds, a lot of moving parts. Is we hunt, we catch whatever, we get the bird gets a few tidbits, a little bit off the kills. They get 5 to 10 grams off a rabbit, say. And when you come home, they're not fed up yet to that 22-hour thing, whatever you want. So we weigh every bird again, right down the kill, like Jen said, and then I have to be. I'm a savant. I think maybe even an idiot savant was the extreme one.
Could be.
I don't weigh the food. I've been weighing. I can weigh with my hand. Been doing this for 50-something years, from sharp shins to to whatever the hawk eagles, and so I know how much food I got in my hand. So I have to feed. I don't want the birds baiting. I don't want them dulling their talons. Talons are everything to me too. Keep everything perfect. So I got them on grass like a falconry meat. And so Matt's seen me do this a million times. It's like, so Jen hollers out the weight, so-and-so's 1,030, so I want to say 1,045 tomorrow. So I look at the meat, I got it all kind of beat up, rabbits and whatever. And I kind of look at it and I go, okay, that's exactly the right amount of meat. And I run each bird, and I'll feed 8 birds in maybe under 2 minutes. And it's all done. And because I don't want any birds, I don't want the bird finishing ahead of another bird. It'll bait at the other bird, dull his talons. So everything is done extremely quickly and efficiently. And it's a bit crazy, but I don't have time to sit there weighing food. Hey, I wish I did, but it doesn't work that way in our life. So you kind of get good at just stupid little things like that, And I'm good at ice chest management on how long it takes meat to thaw. That's one of the savant things.
I think these are things that we could add to the Olympics.
It's the only skills I have is weighing meat in my hand and how long does it take meat to thaw. That's it. I think I can leave now.
Yeah, well, so the main take home there is like with proper management, the bird's always ready to hunt, every day at some point anyway. So now I want to talk about what the holy grail for falconers is, and that's finding the optimum hunting weight for your hawk. But there's not just one optimum hunting weight. It can really depend on a lot of conditions, and it can change over time. But the general goals are that you want to maximize the field performance, the bird's fitness, and it also social behaviors too. You want the bird to play nice with others, which would include like humans, dogs, or in our case, other hawks. So how do we go about finding the holy grail? Oops. All right. So performance, we want to see, what does that weight mean? We want to judge what the weight means by looking at field performance. We really want to have rapid field performance. And for us, a lot of our fields are kind of small. There may be a road nearer than we'd like it to be. We really want that bird to come back to us quickly. But it also has to have some degree of independence. It should come back on command, but also take high perches. So another aspect of performance would be that what we call the rebound phenomenon. I mean, harrisocks do this all the time. I see red tails and other birds do it too, where they miss and then they're like ready to just go. They're just jumping back up and getting right back into the hunt, right? So looking at only the number of kills for performance, field performance, wouldn't really tell you enough about the hawk's performance. And some hunting situations are more difficult than others. In some areas, prey availability may be low. We live in a place where the cover is exceptionally thick. So if a young hawk is hitting down hard and it's rebounding after missing a rabbit, then we don't consider lowering its weight even if it hasn't caught, because it's showing us that it's doing all it can. I mean, maybe we need to do a better job of putting more rabbits in front of it, but we're not going to lower its weight. So Tom, you want to talk more about like the look of falconry?
Yeah, it's got to, again, to get back to it, it's got to look a certain way. In other words, it's got to be a kind of a well-oiled machine. I'm sure you out there that really game hawkers, I'm sure there's a bunch of you out there that just know, I don't even mind if I don't. Some days I might not catch anything even, but I know if the birds did everything they were supposed to do, I come home happy because I know the next day they're gonna put a bunch in the bag. So it's that where the birds are always a position. You ask it to come up, you do this, you raise your hand, it moves up, it stays out of danger. It's just running a tight ship, and if it's got to look that way. Well, here's a perfect example. We don't hunt with many other people anymore, but we don't have time. But when we do, it's usually we go hunting in the field, and we're out front, be beating for rabbits, whatever. And we look back and the birds aren't even in position, and we're kind of like, what's the point of us working this hard? And we kind of ask the falconer, what's going on? Oh, that's just their style. They like to hang back, and one likes to go over there, and they make it into like a game, like the hawks know what they're doing. No, it's like, no, look in the mirror. You're the problem. You got the weight all wrong, and you make excuses for the birds. And the birds, they just everything's loose, and it shouldn't look loose. It should look tight. I mean, whether you're flying, whatever it is, a peregrine, anything, whatever it is, it's got to look like you've done it before, and the birds have done it before, and and the game ought to be worried about it. It's that simple. But again, a lot of people haven't seen good falconry. And I would recommend anybody going to any meet to find out who's really slaying the game, which other kind of raptor you're interested in, and go with that person, not just because of the species, but go with somebody who knows what they're doing. Like I saw Eric Edwards here. Well, if you want to see about a Merlin, go with Eric Edwards. You want to see a kestrel fly, go with Matt Mullinex or whatever. Just do things that make sense. Don't just I noticed at falconry meets, people it's loose again. It's like, do you really care enough to figure this out? And I do, and a lot of you guys do. That's why you tuned in, hopefully. But anyway, I'll let Jen finish this up here.
Oh, so moving on to this is kind of basics, but it probably deserves mentioning, and we probably have some beginners with us here. We're going to cover signs of an overweight and an underweight hawk, and don't fear, we're not going to read every one of these, but you can read the Harris Hawk Revolution. But basically, for any species, they're showing you plenty of signs that the hawk's overweight. Now, hawks may soar, and they may be soaring because they're hunting, and maybe it's all good. But if a hawk just takes off and starts soaring for no reason, I'm like immediately like, I bet that hawk's fat as can be. It really isn't anyway. So generally speaking, as Tom was mentioning, birds lagging behind, soaring, flying out of the field.
Also fighting. Heavy weight brings on fighting, believe it or not. A lot of people think it's the opposite like hunger does. Hunger causes another hawk to eat another one, but overweight hawks really are a trouble if you're trying to fly in, a cast or a group or whatever. You don't want overweight hawks because, again, the devil, it's the, idle mind's the devil's workshop. It's kind of like, hey, I don't need to eat. I'm not hungry. I'm just going to mess with you. I'm just going to mess with the other hawk. And so, again, if you run that tight ship, they're not worried about looking at each other. They're looking for game and all that. It's all about that. All adds up to just keeping that thing rolling along the way it's supposed to, with the proper weight. And but it's complicated to figure it all out over years. In such a bunch of different species, but it's all the same. Every species basically. It all matters. Weight matters.
Yeah, the main thing, and Tom's actually the one who said this, is that if it's an overweight hawk, it's too independent and it doesn't need you at all. And we all know that look, and it's not the look that you want.
I better not see that look because I'm mad at myself. If I ever see that look, I'm looking in the mirror because I caused that.
Yeah. So then on the flip side of the coin, signs of an underweight hawk, and some of this stuff, I hope that you never get a hawk into this condition, but easily recognize things are at tires easily. It flies like a butterfly. A hawk should not fly there's no hawk that flies like a butterfly. It flies low, and mainly, some of the things we see, especially with young birds, is it's returning immediately to your glove once you're trying to cast it off. You can't get away from it. You practically have to run away from it if you're trying to fly it on the creance or something. It's alighting on your back or on the back of your neck, whatever, jumping into your game bag, lands at your feet. I mean, all this stuff that, just because a hawk lands once at your feet, it doesn't mean it's low, but you get the picture though. A bird that's screaming in the field while it's hunting, that's generally a bad sign. And it's gripping the glove. I mean, some of these things can be training mistakes that people have made too, where they're overtraining the hawk and causing it to be fist bound. But generally speaking, these are signs that you may have dropped the weight too fast and too much, or both. And then if you get to the point of like labored breathing and stuff, you really need to reach out for help because it's going to be hard that's life threatening. So hopefully you don't ever see that. But anyway. So let's talk about fitness then, after talking about weight control a little bit. What really happens when a hawk is losing weight? I mean, at some point, it's lost its fat. And let's look at, this is a study on wild Cooper's hawks, okay? So they took the pectoralis muscle, the big breast muscle that's on the outside, like when we're feeling a keel, that's what you're feeling. It's the muscle that powers the downstroke. It's the red muscle in this diagram here. It makes up about 20%, a little bit less, of the body mass of a male or a female Cooper's hawk. And then in this study, they looked at the composition of the muscle, and 25% of it, or a quarter of it, was lean dry mass. So that's only a lot of protein. And then there's 73% of it is water, and 2% of it is fat. So there's not a lot of it that's fat, right? So that fat, and that's going to vary with the species, but not a whole lot, right? So when your hawk when you're dropping the weight on a hawk after it's burned through its fat, what do you think it's losing? It's losing water and lean dry mass. So you don't really want your hawk to be burning muscle. I mean, some of that's probably going to be necessary, but you don't want to lose any pectoral muscle that you don't have to. And, you were talking about the roller coaster ride. What do you think that does to a hawk's muscles?
Bring it up and down, and oh, I'm going on a diet. Now I'm going to gain weight. That can't be good on your fitness. I mean, it's just to me. I mean,
and so that's one of the things too I mentioned earlier. Like when you've got a young bird, and you're training it, and then suddenly you're hunting it. Well, maybe maybe when you're hunting it, if it's performing really well and it's flying long distances, you may need to be bumping the weight up 5 or 10 grams here or there because it's building muscle. I mean, it's something to be a little flexible with and try, you know. So we're old school and we feel the keel. We were talking about being old school earlier with the Zoom meeting, right? But weight control has to be accompanied by carefully monitoring the hawk's condition. And one way to do that is to regularly feel the pectoral muscling on either side of the keel. Now, these are keels shown in profile but for a study that we were doing. But feeling the keel is especially important, I think, in young hawks. We want to make sure that we're adjusting the weight upward as the hawk is flying more and building muscle. And we've done some selective breeding in Harris hawks for speed. And we noticed that these birds have very different shaped keels. Like, I'm going to let you look at those 3 keels and you can tell me which one you think's the fastest one. The one on the right. Okay, so having a deeper keel that's quite expansive and has more surface for pectoral muscle is selecting for faster flight. And similar experiments have been done in pigeons. And so one of the points of this is that that hawks are individuals. There's genetic variation, and not every keel is shaped the same. They're shaped different in different species, but even within a species, these are all Harris hawk keels. And so as a falconer, we ought to spend a little more time on that, like feel like, okay, this is where the top of the keel is. It make some notes on the shape of the hawk's keel. And that way, when you're feeling it, first of all, you might notice if there's been an injury, but also, you know, you're going to be better able to judge what's happening with the pectoral muscle because it's hard to tell otherwise. So the devil is in the details, and now we're going to talk about some pretty detailed determinants of hunting weight and the ideal hunt or the optimum hunting weight and how that can change with conditions. There are a multitude of factors, and these are some that we consider to be environmental. In other words, they're not genetically determined. The temperature, you know, like if it's hot, then generally you have to have the bird at a lower weight. We're always comparing weights. Sometimes we've had birds that came from a colder climate, and I'm like, oh my God, you flew that bird 100 grams or 50 grams heavier than we did. But yeah, it was, you know, in the teens a lot of the time. So totally different weather. So that can really change what's going on with optimum hunting weight. Let's see. If you're hunting, oh yeah, I know what. If you have a really small hunting field, like the size of a postage stamp, which unfortunately many of us are experiencing that now, right? Then you may need to have tighter weight control, which means you're going to have a lower optimum hunting weight for your conditions. And then if you're hunting in a really vast, safe area and it's cold weather, well, we're all envious of you. And those are ideal conditions for having an upward optimum hunting weight. Did you want to tell that story about Toby too?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one. It even surprised me after all these years. But my friend Toby Bradshaw hunts in the middle of Oregon in a high sagebrush, high altitude, 4,500 feet, pretty high. Anyway, he flies a cast of 2 female Harris hawks. And they're basically, you know, our genes. We bred them. He bred them. They're the same kind of birds. And he starts off flying them basically kind of the way we would here. And then he basically just doesn't even have to lower it. They keep getting heavier and heavier and heavier until they're 200 or 300 grams heavier than when he started sometimes. It's ridiculous. I mean, they don't have any breasts. They don't have any bones, any breastbone. It's just a big round, huge breast, like a butterball turkey. And you go, well, how can this be? Well, it makes sense once you think about it. He hunts exactly the same time every day, exactly the same place, and the flights start off at a quarter mile away. Start there. And he doesn't see any of the jackrabbits. They're in high sage.
And it's high altitude.
High altitude. So the bird the bird, even though it's getting heavier and heavier, it's getting just muscle and muscle and muscle. And even somebody overweight gets hungry every day, right? So the next day they're ready to roll. And he does have to limit it a little bit, but not much. It's just, but it's in extreme conditions. And of course, when he writes about this, people will say, well, how does he do that? Well, it's like, no, you can't apply that to where you live or where I live and what I do. You know, I mean, for us, 100-yard flight is long here. So we go out west, it's a whole nother ball game for us. We got to adjust to this. But he does exactly the same thing every day. I mean, never misses a day. Never even 20 minutes off, he says.
Yeah.
So it really, that's another thing. Routine will save your butt a
Right.
lot. Hawks love routine. Falconry is very hard if you fly at different times of the day. You miss a day, you're just inconsistent. That's very bad, as most of you guys know, have flown birds. If you can do it at the same time, same everything. It's routine. Can even if you're off on a weight a bit, if it's routine, you can get by pretty well. But if you're off on a weight, then you take it to a strange place, and and your time is off. Well, then it's really exaggerated. The only problem you have. So anyway, it's a crazy story. I remember him telling me this years ago, and I'm going, "What, Toby? What?" And of course, I respect him. I know he killed 5,000 jacks out there already. So, I know he knows what he's doing. But I'm going, this is not my experience.
He's not going to do anything that's going to limit his game intake. Okay. So, all right. Well, moving on to talk about seasonal changes in hunting weight. I wanted to focus on late season. And you might think that late season would automatically be that your hawk's in a groove and it's been hunting all season and it's in great shape, and that its hunting weight should be at its highest at the end of the season. Well, this might be true for younger birds because the goal is to maximize fitness and have the best field performance possible. But maximizing fitness in older birds in the springtime can be big trouble. Older hawks might, sometimes it's not a big deal, but they might not hunt. They'll jump into a crow nest or a red-shouldered hawk nest, and they'll start arranging sticks, and they don't want to leave, and they don't even want to come down from the nest. But it's really not desirable when they start picking a fight with another castmate, a dominance fight. And depending on the hawk and how it was raised or trained, it might also make it more likely to attack humans and or dogs. So what's going on here is there's breeding hormones are ramping up. And in trying to maximize fitness and body weight, there are going to be some trade-offs when it's reaching reproductive time, because birds are responding to photoperiod cues and body fat and releasing reproductive hormones as the day length increases. And basically, breeding hormones are not conducive to good falconry. And the more body fat a hawk has, the more receptive it's going to be to changes in the photoperiod or increasing day length. And I'll just throw this in here quickly. A study was done on sex hormones in wild Harris hawks in February and March, and many of us are still hawking in February and March, right, when nest building's occurring. And they found elevated levels of the sex hormones, testosterone and luteinizing hormone in males, and in females, they also found elevated levels of estrogen in the adults. And so, what this is showing is there are other things going on in the bird's body, and the more body fat the bird has, the more likely it's going to turn into a hormonal hawk. And that's not something you really want in your falconry season. So what that really means is, if you see it starting to happen, you may need to lower the bird's weight. Yeah. And the bird may be more aggressive around its perch and different things like that.
Always lower on that.
Yeah.
Never raise lower.
Yeah, definitely, tailor it back some, burn off some of that fat. Okay, so let's talk about the life experiences of a hawk and what that has to do with what its optimum hunting weight is, because of course this might change over time. So the origin, whether the bird is wild caught or whether it's captive bred, whether it's an eyas or a passage bird, how it was reared. I'm sorry, whether it's an eyas or an imprint, or if it was parent raised. And then its hunting experience, and training methods, and the bird's hunting experience. If a bird's an experienced hunter, then it tends to have a higher optimum hunting weight, which is, kind of a no-brainer. It's a made hawk, right? If it's had game-inflicted injuries, this can really factor in too. A hawk that's been wounded by prey, especially if it's been really violent, like with a jackrabbit or hare, you may need to reduce its weight to incentivize it. We had a male Harris hawk that was pulled underwater by a drake mallard, and I couldn't find it. I was about to jump in the water. We thought he was about to drown, and he finally popped up and he'd let go of the duck. But he didn't want to hunt ducks again. We dropped his weight a little bit, and I was like, you know what? That's okay. We can just hunt rabbits with him. You understand how that could have been a bad experience. Just a couple of words about optimum hunting weight and Harris hawks in general. Captive bred Harris hawks. This is one of the things that really fools people who are first flying a Harris hawk. They may have been somebody who had flown passage red-tailed hawks in the past. For some reason, captive bred Harris hawks tend to fly back at a much higher weight, have that, come back to the glove than what's going to be their actual hunting weight. So maybe what would you give like an example? Like if the hawk's hunting weight is 1,000 grams, it may fly back to you really quickly at 1050 or something.
Yeah, 1050 easy to
or,
fly back. It'll look good to most people. It'll look fine. And then, they go out and only jump 1 or 2 rabbits, it still may look fine. It still may kind of give a half-hearted attempt. But again, that's another thing that straightens things out. The more game you put under them, the more easily it is for you to figure out, his proper weight, because the bird's going to tell you. The bird's trying to tell you the whole time. If you just, listen, watch and listen, pay attention. Yeah. Because the bird, just by its reactions, by the way it handles itself, is telling you whether you ought to go up or down. But and that takes years from experience to kind of do it quickly. And I've made mistakes back in the past, and millions of them. And but you learn by them. You don't try to do it again. And like the smaller the bird, the more the tighter everything's got to be, and on and on. But
yeah. So and then captive bred Harris hawks tend to require less weight reduction than passage birds, and that's a generalization, but it's generally true. Yes. Yeah. And it also captive bred birds tend to have a wider optimal weight range, so they're more forgiving. Like you might have a window. We're not recommending to have a window that wide of say 50 grams. We prefer to stay tight. But and then all Harris hawks are very cold sensitive compared to say a goshawk or a red-tailed hawk, and it's they're adapted to warmer climates, and they may have to be flown considerably heavier in colder climates, and that's not something that we have a lot of experience with. But okay, so let's talk now. We've focused more on environmental determinants. Let's look at genetic determinants of weight control, and some of these are going to have environmental components too, so we'll try to point those out. But we're going to talk about sex, whether it's a male or female, drive, courage, confidence, tameability, and appetite. Sex is easy, right? Hawks have reverse sexual size dimorphism, or RSD. It should be maybe RSSD. Anyway, the Harris hawk the male weighs about 1/3 less than the female. So they're proportionately smaller, and it naturally follows that a smaller animal is going to require a tighter weight control. And we really do find that to be true. Yeah, we usually keep males within plus or minus 5 grams of what we think is their ideal hunting weight. And but there are some other reasons why males need tighter weight control too. It's not just their size. They have a tendency to roam more and get in more trouble.
Yeah, for us, it's getting in trouble, right? As Matt's flown few males, and for us, it's like you put a male in with a bunch of females. Well, females are a lot steadier than a male. Well, a male around here we have tens of just thousands of egrets and herons and ducks and things that you don't want to hunt because it's dangerous. It's across a highway. It's over a bridge. It's across a bayou. I want everything tight here. I'm hunting rabbits, say whatever. So you put a male up
for safety reasons.
But you put a male up, and he gets bored. 1 minute into the hunt, there's an egret. quarter mile away, off he goes. Well, guess what? All the females follow him, So again, we have to have practice tight weight control, especially on the males, because I don't want them messing around. Around here to get in trouble. It wouldn't hurt if I'm in the middle of New Mexico. It's not the end of the world, but I'm not in New Mexico. I'm in a smaller area, unfortunately, and I've got to control things more. And males are a little harder to control, which is, hey, I love them. They're wonderful. They're so versatile.
They spice up the hunt, and
they start a drink, so to speak. They really keep it going. They're great at following, great at moving around. But again, if you let them get a little too independent, it'll bite you.
They will be, yeah, they will be. Okay, so drive is a determinant of hunting weight. Some hawks have really incredible drive. I mean, we're just blown away by them. And drive can be shaped by environmental and genetic factors, but we think it's probably largely genetic. That some hawks, they just want to hunt all day and every day. And from our selective breeding, we've found evidence that some of this appears to be heritable. I mean, we haven't identified the genes or anything. I don't mean to say that, but we're seeing patterns where it seems to be passed down. So if a bird has drive and wants to keep going, they can generally be kept at a higher weight. Confidence is another one. And I think Vixen came out of the egg a confident hawk. She just exudes confidence. I mean, I think you can look at the way she holds herself and see that she's a confident hawk. She's Tom's hawk. I wish she was mine. And she just really,
I got lucky. I get lucky.
She sees it and she goes after it, and she knows she can catch it. I mean, she doesn't catch everyone, but you're like, what? And then, she's just, every time she misses, she's back up and running again, flying again. But there are ways. So yeah, we all want that hawk that it just has that natural confidence, but that's innate. But what about ways to boost a hawk's confidence? I mean, we know we do this all the time as falconers. You're going to enter a hawk. So the first thing you might do is drag a dead rabbit, let the hawk eat on the dead rabbit, let it know that it's food and it's something that it really wants. You might provide it with bagged game a few times. And then you might set it up for the perfect hunt where you're like, oh man, I've got this sweet little strip where somebody's gonna flush the rabbit out and I'm gonna be waiting, give it advantages that are almost like a bagged rabbit situation, like build its confidence, and then take it to places where it has repeated success, where you really just focus on, I know there's a lot of game, I'm gonna have extra beaters, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Repeated success builds confidence, but again, it's really nice to have it as an innate quality.
Very, very.
So another determinant of weight, another thing that will help you to have higher optimum weight would be tameability. And tameability is an innate quality, but tame hawks can generally be flown at a higher weight. They overcome fear, and there's a nature-nurture side of this. And the nurturing side, the way to make a hawk tamer, I mean, we all know this, right? You could start with an imprint. Imprints will pretty much attack anything, some imprints anyway. You can also do intensive training in addition to hand raising, or you can live with the hawk, have it inside your house, the way some Arabs do. And you could also, you could handle the hawk year round. Harry McElroy was doing that for some of his Passage Cooper's hawks to nurture this tameability along.
But for us, I don't recommend this at all for the way we do it. I don't want to touch my hawks for 6 months. I don't want to. Right. I don't want them to. They become.
Well, we have captive bred
hawks, and they become. In other words, all hawks, even hawks raised by the parents for 6 months, if you put them with one falconer for years, they become basically an imprint. They won't breed with other hawks often. They just become. I've seen humans so many.
Passage redtail that at 8 years old lays an egg for its falconer. Passage redtail do
the same thing. They've only been out on their own for 6 months, and then you put them with a falconer for 10 years. Well, the 10 years overcomes the 6 months. So I basically don't touch any of the birds for 6 months and let them,
The
let
molt,
them,
yeah.
let them get a little wild. I don't, every time I hear people that live with their birds, you know, it's kind of like they just get kind of baby fodder call, or just kind of, you know, it's not the end of the world, but I'm going, what's the upside to this? I don't see the upside.
Yeah, especially for a species that's tame.
Right, it's
Yeah,
gonna get tame
yeah,
anyway. It's
yeah.
gonna get tame. So
Right.
why overdo it, I guess, is my way of looking at it, you know. And I remember we used to fly Merlins a lot and stuff in Shopshins. Hey, just leave them alone. They tame down in a week or two and we train them again. It wasn't the end of the world, you know. But again, each his own on that, but beware, I think, of overdoing it, you know.
Yeah, we don't recommend imprinting in Harris hawks or intense
No.
training either. Yeah,
Ever.
yeah, could be become a dangerous hawk. So let's talk about this. I wanted to just mention the silver fox domestication experiment, which was pretty incredible, that relates to tameability. And just to show that it can be, tameability can be genetically selected for. This experiment started in the 1950s, and about 10% of thousands of farm-bred foxes exhibited tameness. So what they would do is, like, they would have the fox in the cage and they would put their hand next to it and see if the fox came up to inquisitively, like maybe even smell their finger or lick their finger. And they're like, oh, you're one of the breeders, right? So that's how they started this experiment. And these founders then set the stage for a project that now involves over 10,000 parents and over 50,000 offspring that have been selected only for tameness. And again, this is one of the traits that we're selecting for in falconry, not heavily selecting, of course, the way there were no culls, for example. Some birds weren't bred, but they weren't culled. But tameability really does help in falconry in numerous ways, and being able to fly the bird more fitly at a higher weight is one of them. So appetite also is something that can be selected for, and it's a complex phenomenon that involves multiple environmental and genetic factors, and we really don't understand appetite that well in humans, much less birds. But a lot of study has been done in chickens. But appetite in and of itself, think about the multiple ways appetite can change. Like, suppose hawks are hardwired to be desperate right before dusk. So if you only hunted right before dusk, which is something we don't recommend, because what if you lose the hawk? You can fly that hawk at a higher weight because it knows it has to catch something and it's going to perform. You know, they just get accelerated, right? They act hungrier at the time of day when they're usually fed. So there are all these environmental aspects. Hunger can be anticipatory like that. And there are genetic factors that underlie hunger as well. And we know this from chicken experiments, for example. We noticed that, so hunger really appetite really factored into the domestication of the chicken. In selecting for increased appetite, we got increased growth and birds with bigger body weight. Now, we don't really want to have giant fat Harris hawks, but selecting for appetite really allows you to have a bird that's very excited about food and will perform better at a higher weight because it's so hungry.
Yeah, we've been selecting for appetite for 40 years now, and this last pair or two that we're flying right now, we may have gone too far. I'm kind of joking, but it's really almost gone too far. They're so hungry. I'm flying a bird. I took it out the breeding chamber at 1,017. She flies at 1,010 like she's starving to death. I mean, that's 7-gram drop, and it's ridiculous. I mean, by the end of the season, she'd be flying way heavier than I got her right. She was as fat. She has no breastbone at all. So it's like, and she's about to eat me. I mean, it's like she's dying from hunger. It really can be selected for. Trust me, it's a wonderful tool, but it's almost gone too far. They can't see other birds even eating. They'll dig a hole in the ground trying to get to them. They can't. So we have to put them in a box and feed them out of a box when it's time to eat, because
Or
They
move them somewhere.
move 'em. They cannot stand to see another bird eat, even after they've eaten. It doesn't matter. They're hungry all the time, and their parents are basically like that, and they may end up offspring now worse. But anyway, it's a wonderful thing because that makes them so powerful. They fly, as heavy as you can imagine, and so it makes them very powerful and very gamey all the time. But again, I'm not sure we need to go any further on this.
Yeah, we may have achieved our goal.
Yeah, I think we've achieved it.
Maybe have surpassed it. So I'd like to tell you a short story about our selective breeding for both tameness and appetite and how it came to be. Malcolm Edwards was a Georgia falconer, and he had a phenomenal Harris hawk named Sonora. And she was a passage bird. And Tom noticed her when he was at a Napa meet, and Malcolm had caught some white-tailed jacks with her. And fortunately, Malcolm recognized that he had what he had in Sonora, and he had the good sense to breed her. And then we acquired some of her offspring from our breeding program. And here we have Al Nye. All these birds are, the two birds on the left are babies of Sonora. And then Sonora, Malcolm's holding Sonora on the right there. So that's Al Nye holding Georgia, Ken Kitawa holding CC, and Malcolm Edwards holding Sonora. And that was at the the 1980 Alamosa meet. And we want to thank the archives at Falconry for allowing us to use this photo. So a little bit more about that. Here are two of our birds, the Isis and Shadow, that we bred that kind of exemplify tameability and appetite in selective breeding. Shadow is a large male who would hunt jackrabbits reliably within 100-gram range of weights. And we weren't the ones, well, we flew him some, but we saw him do all this. So, and he would catch jackrabbit after jackrabbit in front of females and hold them. Anyway, he was pretty incredible. And then for Isis, let me just show you Isis here. Bob Armbruster flew Isis, and he used to complain, this thing is so hungry, it's about to eat my arm off. I can't even weigh it. And she's as fat as a pig. I can hardly weigh her. And we would just laugh. We thought it was so funny. We were like, yeah, whatever. Wear a thicker shirt. Oh, yeah. Well, he's the one who had the last laugh, because you could see right there. Yeah, that was one of an amazing hunt that Isis had in Amarillo. That was a single hunt, all the jacks and cottontails she caught. So that kind of drive and courage and appetite and tameness really can pay off. I wanted to mention a couple of things that confound, like, your judging performance. Like, what can be things that get in the way that you're like, well, I think I need to drop the bird's weight. Why isn't it catching anything? Why isn't it flying that well? I've had people call me and they're like, what would cause a bird that just hunts all the time to suddenly not fly that well? And I'm like, I bet that bird either got hurt or something's not right, So oftentimes it could be injury. Like, I remember one time, one of my hawks caught a cottontail on a train track, and the cottontail pulled it like under a trestle. And so, like, by the time I got there, her legs were wedged into this metal. And guess what? She was really sore the next day. And for the next few days had trouble holding on to stuff. I mean, she just needed a rest, right? She had soft tissue. Nothing was, you could see a little bruising if you moved all the feathers away. But and then keel injuries, that happens a lot in hawks. I remember one time Tom's hawk Storm, we were out in Wyoming, and we're like, what's wrong with Storm? Why won't she chase the whitetail jacks? We know she'll hunt whitetail jacks. What's going on? And then he finally, I said, Tom's like, let me call her back to the glove. He gets her back to the glove, and I'm feeling her. I'm like, oh man, feel this crack in her keel, So injuries, illness, and like West Nile, for example. West Nile can cause dramatic weight loss because the bird dehydrates so quickly. So you can be like, how did my bird just suddenly drop all that weight? Carbon monoxide poisoning can cause, very common at meets, anytime somebody's making a long trip. So if the bird gets carbon monoxide poisoning, it will often lose weight very quickly. And so you're like, what? Did I forget to feed my hawk? Like, what's going on? And when it flies, it'll start out like the first few flights, it might look good. And then suddenly it's winded. And you're like, what is it, the altitude? And you're like, oh no, it looks like it's something else. And then the bird starts going downhill from there. And those are the lungs there of a hawk that that died of carbon monoxide poisoning. It's that bright cherry red.
Instead of pink.
Yeah, lungs are supposed to be like a light pink color instead. And water ingestion fools a lot of people. The hawk went down in the bath and it just drank a lot. Well, water's heavy. An ounce of water is 28. Yeah, right. Well, an ounce of anything is 28 grams. Anyway, we were on a hunting trip one time and had one of the hawks just knocked the balance on the scale on the ground, and it was off by 25 grams, and it consistently weighed all the hawks to be 25 grams off. And so it took us a little while to figure it out. And at some point it was a hot day in Bakersfield, and I was like, it's almost like my hawk's a little fat. But I weighed it this morning, and then we were like, duh, I had a light bulb, So it's always good to carry an extra
we do
scale or balance, and we do that and check it occasionally. Fearfulness can be a confounding factor too. A bird could just be afraid of a novel situation or novel prey or somebody in the field. And maybe it's at the right hunting weight, or maybe to get it to overcome that fear, you need to bring its weight down something. Anyway, just something to keep in mind too. And then we were going to end with talking about optimum hunting weight for field trips and falconry meets, because it may not be what you're hunting at home. And how do you determine that? So, Tom, you're going to take us home on that, huh?
Yeah, I've been going to falconry meets since 1970, the Yankton meet in Yankton, South Dakota, and it's amazing how hard it is. I'm sure a lot of you've been to meets, but this is the meet season, state meets, federal, national meets, whatever. It's one of the hardest things. It's one of the most dangerous times for your hawk. More hawks die on meets, I think, than any other time during the year. Between carbon monoxide, getting there, and then all of the schedules are all messed up. I just kind of written a little thing real quick, but I'm just thinking meets can be difficult. You're hunting in a strange place, maybe on different game. Your schedule is out of whack. There's added pressure to catch. It's a recipe for confusion, is what it is. And proper weight is almost impossible to figure out. It's a different climate. So anyway. You're always under pressure to get it right, and you have very little time. Most of these meets, 5 days is about as long as they ever go. So every meet I've ever been to, I'm always sitting around going, should I raise the bird's weight? Should I lower it? And now I just leave it the same, and until I get there, and then I don't hit it with a heavy hand. I'm kind of,
right.
A few grams here and there, day to day, depending on the weather, but
usually 5 grams up or down for a female.
Right, but I was always, to this day, you're always wondering, because it's just, you take one bird out, you don't jump much, and you can't tell. You take another bird out, you jump a whole lot. You can determine that. And I remember, flying Cooper's hawks back at meet and Merlins, and it's the same difference. It's like, oh, well, I'm flying different things. I got different, and you're sitting around just scratching your head all the time. And of course, by the end of the meet, you got to figure it out. But then it's time to go home. So anyway, I'm just going to bring that up is get on a schedule as best you can. In other words, that's something we don't change our schedule. We don't go fly with other people. We don't have time. So everything is basically, we try to keep it as it was at home. It's the best thing. But when I notice other people, they're staying up to 2 a.m. They don't get hot until whatever after breakfast. They don't feed the bird till 10 o'clock at night, and they're going to hunt in the morning. It's a recipe for disaster, and it always is. And they're always. And I see them treating their birds poorly because of it, because the bird doesn't perform right. So they hit it with a heavy hand, and the bird suffers. I don't mean they die or anything, but it just becomes, the falcon is frustrated, the bird's not happy, all because the schedule is messed up. And your schedule is everything. It really is, and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure, Matt Molinex with his Kestrels and Eric with Merlins, it's like, they're not up to 2 or 3 in the morning, they're used to it when they were younger, but not now. No. It is. It's scheduling and everything. Just that routine. Very important.
Maybe we talked a little bit too much for some people about selective breeding, but all those genetic traits are genetic traits that are in wild birds. And so, it's really important, I think, to recognize individual variation in any bird. And so as falconers, you want to know what each bird is like. You want to recognize all the nuances and dial in their weight accordingly. So